Chapter 6 Vikrama, the Carriers of Bad Faith. Nandi waited at a distance in the garden as he had been asked to, while Shiva stepped behind the hedge that separated the dance arena from the garden. The silent dance stage had already convinced Nandi that his lord would not find anybody there. However, Shiva was filled with hope and waited expectantly for Sati. After having waited for the larger part of an hour, Shiva realized that there would be no dance practice today. Deeply disappointed, he walked silently back to Nandi. Is there somebody I can help you find, my lord? Asked an earnest Nandi. No, Nandi, forget it. Trying to change the topic, Nandi said, My lord, you must be hungry. Should we go back to the guest house and eat? No, I had liked to see a little more of the city, said Shiva, hoping that fate would be kind to him and he would run into Sati in the town. Shall we go to one of the restaurants of the Rajat platform? That would be wonderful, smiled Nandi, who hated the simple Brahmin influenced vegetarian food served at the royal guest house. He missed the spicy meats that were served in rough Kshatriya restaurants. Yes, what is Parvateshwar? Asked Daksha. My lord, I'm sorry about the sudden meeting, but I have just received some disturbing news which I must share with you in private. Well, what is it? Shiva is already causing trouble. What have you got against the Nilkant? Groaned Daksha, rolling his eyes in disapproval. Why can't you believe that the Nilkant has come to save us? This has nothing to do with my views on Shiva, my lord. If you will please listen to what I have to say. Chinar Dhwaj saw Shiva in the garden yesterday. Chinar Dhwaj is here already? Yes, Your Highness, his review with you has been fixed for the day after tomorrow. Anyway, so what did Chinar Dhwaj see? He is also sickeningly taken in by the Nilkant, so I think we can safely assume that he doesn't have any prejudice. All right, I believe you. So what did he see the Nilkant do? He saw Shiva dancing in the garden, answered Parvateshwar. So, is there a law banning dance that I am not aware of? Please let me continue, Your Highness. He was dancing while Sati watched in rapt attention. His interest suddenly aroused. Daksha leaned forward to ask, and? Sati behaved correctly and left the moment Shiva tried to get too familiar. But Chinar Dhwaj heard Shiva whispered something when Sati left. Well, what did he whisper? He whispered, Holy Lake, help me get her. I will not ask for anything else from you ever again. Daksha appeared delighted. You mean the Nilkant may actually be in love with my daughter? Your Highness, you can't forget the law of the land, exclaimed a horrified Parvateshwar. You know that Sati can't marry. If the Nilkant decides to marry Sati, no law on earth can stop him. My lord, forgive me, but the rule of law is the very foundation of our civilization. That's what makes us who we are, better than the Chandravanshis and the Nagas. Not even Lord Ram was above the law. Then how can this barbarian be considered so important? Don't you want Sati to be happy? Asked Daksha. She is also called Parvati for a reason. It's because she is your goddaughter. Don't you want her to find joy once again? I love Sati like the daughter I never had, Your Highness, said Parvateshwar, with a rare display of emotion in his eyes. I would do anything for her, except break the law. That is the difference between you and me. For Sati's sake, I would not mind breaking any law. She is my daughter, my flesh and blood. She has suffered enough already. If I can find some way to make her happy, I will do it, no matter what the consequences. Shiva and Nandi tethered their horses in the parking lot next to the main Rajat platform market. Moving forward, Nandi guided Shiva towards one of his favorite restaurants. The inviting aroma of freshly cooked meat brought forth a nostalgic hunger in Nandi that had not been satisfied in the past 2 days at the royal guest house. The owner, however, stopped Shiva at the entry. What's the matter, brother? Asked Nandi. I am deeply sorry, brother, but I too am undergoing religious woes at this time, said the restaurant owner politely, pointing to the beads around his throat. And you know that one of the woes is that I can't serve meat to fellow religious vow keepers. Nandi blurted out in surprise. But who has taken religious? He was stopped by Shiva, who signaled downwards with his eyes at the bead covered cravat around his throat. Nandi nodded and followed Shiva out of the restaurant. This is the time of the year for religious vow, my lord, explained Nandi. Why don't you wait on the side? There are some good restaurants on the street at the right. I will go and see if I can find a restaurant owner who has not taken his vows. Shiva nodded his assent. As Nandi hurried off, Shiva looked around the street. It was a busy market area with restaurants and shops spread out evenly. But despite the large number of people and the buzz of commerce, the street was not noisy. None of the shopkeepers stepped out to scream and advertise their wares. The customers spoke softly and in an unfailingly polite manner, even if they were bargaining. These well mannered idiots would not be able to conduct any business in our boisterous mountain market. Shiva, lost in his observation of the strange practices of the Meluhans, did not hear the announcement of the town crier till he was almost right behind him. Procession of Vikram women, please move. A surprised Shiva turned to find a tall Meluha Kshatriya looking down at him. Would you care to move aside, sir? A procession of Vikram women will soon pass this way for their prayers. The crier's tone and demeanor was unquestionably courteous, but Shiva was under no illusions. The crier was not asking Shiva to move, he was telling him. Shiva stepped back to let the procession pass as Nandi touched him gently on his arm. I have found a good restaurant, my lord, said an ecstatic Nandi. It serves my favorite dishes and the kitchen is open for yet another hour. A lot of food to stuff ourselves with. Shiva laughed out loud. It's a wonder that just one restaurant can actually make enough food to satisfy your hunger. Nandi laughed along good naturedly as Shiva patted his friend on the back. As they turned and walked into the lane, Shiva asked, What are Vikram women? Vikram people, my lord, said Nandi, sighing deeply, are people who have been punished in this birth for the sins of their previous birth. Hence, they have to live this life out with dignity and tolerate their present sufferings with grace. This is the only way they can wipe their karma clean of the sins of their previous births. Vikram men have their own order of penance and women have their own order. There was a procession of Vikram women on the road we just left. Is their puja a part of the order? Asked Shiva. Yes, my lord. There are many rules that the Vikrama women have to follow. They have to pray for forgiveness every month to Lord Agni, the purifying fire god, through a specially mandate puja. They are not allowed to marry since they may contaminate others with their bad fate. They are not allowed to touch any person who is not related to them or is not part of their daily life. There are many other conditions as well that I am not completely aware of. If you are interested, we could meet up with a Pandit at the Agni temple later and he could tell you all about Vikram people. No, I'm not interested in meeting the Pandit right now, said Shiva with a smile. He might just bore me with some very confusing and abstruse philosophies. But tell me one thing. Who decides that the Vikram people had committed sins in their previous birth? Their own karma, my lord, said Nandi, his eyes suggesting the obvious. For example, if a woman give birth to a stillborn child, why would she be punished thus unless she had committed some terrible sin in her previous birth? Or if a man suddenly contracts an incurable disease and gets paralyzed, why would it happen to him unless the universe was penalizing him for the sins of his previous life? That sounds pretty ridiculous to me. A woman could have given birth to a stillborn child simply because she did not take proper care while she was pregnant, or it could just be a disease. How can anyone say that she is being punished for the sins of her previous birth? Nandi, shocked by Shiva's statements, struggled to find words to respond. He was a Meluhan and deeply believed in the concept of karma being carried over many births. He mumbled softly, "It's the law, my lord." Well, to be honest, it sounds like a rather unfair law to me. Nandi's crestfallen face showed that he was profoundly disappointed that Shiva did not understand such a fundamental concept of Meluha. But he also kept his own counsel for fear of opposing what Shiva said. After all, Shiva was his lord. Seeing a dejected Nandi, Shiva patted him gently on the back. "Nandi, that was just my opinion. If the law works for your people, I am sure there must be some logic to it. Your society might be a little strange at times, but it has some of the most honest and decent people I have ever met." As a smile returned almost instantly to Nandi's face, his whole being was stricken by his immediate problem. His debilitating hunger, he entered the restaurant like a man on a mission, with Shiva chuckling softly behind. A short distance away on the main road, the procession of Vikram women walked silently on. They were all draped in long angavastrams which were dyed in the holy blue color. Their hands were bowed low in penitence. Their puja thalis or prayer plates full of offering to Lord Agni. The normally quiet market street became almost deathly silent as the pitiful women lumbered by. At the center of the procession, unseen by Shiva, with her head bowed low, draped in a blue angavastram that covered her from head to toe, her face a picture of resigned dignity, trudged the forlorn figure of Sati. "So, where we were, my lord?" said Daksha, as Shiva and Nandi settled down in his private office the next morning. "We were about to discuss the changes that Lord Ram brought about, Your Highness, and how he defeated the rebellion of the renegade Brahmins," answered Shiva. "That's right," said Daksha. "Lord Ram did defeat the renegade Brahmins, but in his view, the core problem ran deeper. It wasn't just a matter of some Brahmins not following the code. There was a conflict between a person's natural karma and what society forced him to do." "I don't understand, Your Highness." "Let me explain. Do you know what was the essential problem with the renegade Brahmins? Some of them wanted to be Kshatriyas and rule. Some of them wanted to be Vaishyas, make money, and live a life of luxury. However, their birth confined them to being Brahmins. But I thought that Lord Brahma had decreed that people became Brahmins through a competitive examination process," said Shiva. "That is true, my lord, but over time, this process of selection lost its fairness. Children of Brahmins become Brahmins. Children of Kshatriyas become Kshatriyas, and so on. The formal system of selection soon ceased to exist. A father would ensure that his children got all the resources and support needed to grow up and become a member of his own caste. So the caste system became rigid." Did that also mean that there could have been a person talented enough to be a Brahmin, but if he was born to Shudra parents, he would not get the opportunity to become a Brahmin? Asked Shiva. "Yes, Shiva. said Parvateshwar, speaking for the first time to Shiva. He noticed that Parvateshwar did not fawn all over him and call him Lord. In Lord Rama's view, any society that conducted itself on any principle besides merit could not be stable. He believed that a person's caste should be determined only by that person's karma, not his birth, not his sex. No other consideration should interfere. That is nice in theory, Parvateshwar, argued Shiva, but how do you ensure it in practice? If a child is born in a Brahmin family, he would get the upbringing and resources which would be different from that of a child born in a Shudra family. So, this child would grow up to be a Brahmin even if he was less talented than the Shudra boy. Isn't this unfair to the child born in the Shudra family? Where is the merit in the system? That was the genius of Lord Ram Shiva, smiled Parvateshwar. He was, of course, a brave general, a brilliant administrator, and a fair judge. But his greatest legacy is the system he created to ensure that a person's karma is determined only by his abilities, nothing else. That system is what has made Meluha what it is, the greatest nation in history. You can't underestimate the role that Somras has played, Parvateshwar, said Daksha. Lord Ram's greatest act was to provide the Somras to everyone. The elixir is what makes Meluhans the smartest people in the universe. The Somras is what has given us the ability to create this remarkable and near perfect society. Begging your pardon, Your Highness, said Shiva before turning back to Parvateshwar. But what was the system that Lord Ram set up? The system is simple, said Parvateshwar. As we agreed, the best society is the one where a person's caste is decided purely by his ability and karma, not by any other factor. Lord Ram created a practical system that ensured this. All children that are born in Meluha are compulsory adopted by the empire. In order to ensure that this is done methodically, a great hospital city called Maika was built deep in the south, just north of the Narmada River. All pregnant women have to travel there for their delivery. Only pregnant women are allowed into the city, nobody else. Nobody else? What about her husband, her parents? Asked Shiva. No, there are no exceptions to this rule except for one. This exception was voted in around 300 years ago. Husbands and parents of women of noble families were allowed to enter, answered Parvateshwar, his expression clearly showing that he voluntarily disagreed with this corruption of Lord Rama's system. Then who takes care of the pregnant women in Maika? The hospital staff. They are extremely well trained, continued Parvateshwar. Once the child is born, he or she is kept in Maika for a few weeks while the mother travels back to her own city. Without her child? Asked a clearly surprised Shiva. Yes, replied Parvateshwar with a slight frown as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. The child is then put into the Meluha Gurukul, a massive school created by the empire close to Maika. Every single child receives the benefit of the same education system. They grow up with all the resources of the empire available to them. Do they maintain records of the parents and their children? Of course they do, but the records are kept in utmost secrecy and are available only with the record keeper of Maika. That would mean that neither in the Gurukul nor in the rest of the empire would anybody know who the child's birth parents are, reasoned Shiva as he worked out the implications of what he was hearing. So, every child, regardless of whether he is born to a Brahmin or a Shudra, would get exactly the same treatment at the Gurukul. Yes, smiled Parvateshwar. He was clearly proud of the system. As the children entered the age of adolescents, they are all given the Somras. Thus, every child has exactly the same opportunity to succeed. At the age of 15, when they have reached adulthood, all the children take a comprehensive examination. The results of this examination decide which Varna or caste the child will be allotted to: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. Kanakala cut in, and then the children are given one more year's caste specific training. They wear their Varna color bands: white for Brahmins, red for Kshatriyas, green for Vaishyas, and black for Shudras, and retreat to the respective caste schools to complete their education. So that's why your caste system is called the Varna system, said Shiva. Varna means color, right? Yes, my lord, smiled Kanakala. You are very observant. With a withering look at Kanakala, Parvateshwar added sarcastically, yes, that was a very difficult conclusion to draw. Ignoring the barb, Shiva asked, so what happens after that? When the children turn 16, they are allowed to applicant parents from their caste. For example, if some Brahmin parents have applied to adopt a child, one randomly chosen student from Maika who has won the Brahmin caste in the examination is allotted to them. Then the child grows up with these adopted parents as their own child. And society is perfect, marveled Shiva as the simple brilliance of the system enveloped his mind. Each person is given a position in society based only on his own abilities. The efficiency and fairness of this system is astounding. Over time, my lord, interjected Daksha, we found the percentage of higher caste actually going up in the population, which means that everybody in the world has the ability to excel. All it takes is for a child to be given a fair chance to succeed. Then the lower caste must have loved Lord Ram for this, asked Shiva. He gave them an actual chance to succeed. Yes, they did love him, answered Parvateshwar. They were his most loyal followers. Jai Shri Ram. But I guess not too many mothers would have been happy with this. I can't imagine a woman willingly giving up her child as soon as he is born with no chance of meeting him ever again. But it's for the larger good, said Parvateshwar, scowling at the seemingly stupid question. And in any case, every mother who wants an offspring can apply for one and be allocated a child who suits her position and dreams. Nothing can be worse for a mother than having a child who does not measure up to her expectations. Shiva frowned at Parvateshwar's explanation, but let the argument pass. I can also imagine that many of the upper castes, like the Brahmins, would have been unhappy with Lord Ram. After all, they lost their stranglehold on power. Yes, added Daksha, many upper castes did oppose Lord Ram's reforms, not just Brahmins, but even Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. Lord Ram fought a great battle to defeat them. Those from among the vanquished who survived are the Chandravanshis we see today. So your differences go that far back? Yes, said Daksha. The Chandravanshis are corrupt and disgusting people. No morals, no ethics. They are the source of all our problems. Some of us believe that Lord Ram was too kind. He should have completely destroyed them, but he forgave them and let them live. In fact, we have to face the mortification of seeing the Chandravanshis rule over Lord Ram's birthplace, Ayodhya. Before Shiva could react to this information, the bell of the new Prahar was rung. Everyone said a quick prayer to welcome the subsequent time chapter. Shiva immediately looked towards the window. A look of expectancy appeared on his face. Daksha smiled as he observed Shiva's expression. We could break for lunch now, my lord, but if you have another engagement you would like to attend, we could continue tomorrow. Parvateshwar glared at Daksha disapprovingly. He knew exactly what the emperor was trying to do. That would be nice, Your Highness, smiled Shiva. Is my face such a giveaway? Yes, it is, my lord, but that is a gift you have. Nothing is prized more than honesty in Meluha. Why don't you leave for your engagement and we could convene here again tomorrow morning? Thanking Daksha profusely, Shiva left the room with Nandi in tow. Shiva approached the hedge with excitement and trepidation. Scarce had he heard the beat of the dhol emanating from the direction of the garden. He dispatched Nandi to the guest house for lunch. He wanted to be alone. He let out a deep sigh of ecstasy as he crept up behind the hedge to find Sati practicing under the watchful eye of the Guruji and Kritika. So good to see you again, Shiva, said the Guruji as he stood up with a formal namaste. The pleasure is all mine, Guruji, said Shiva, as he bent down to touch the Guruji's feet as a sign of respect. Sati stood silently at a distance with her gaze on the floor. Kritika said enthusiastically, I just couldn't get your dance out of my mind. Shiva blushed at the compliment. Oh, it wasn't all that good. Now you are fishing for compliments, teasing Kritika. I was wondering if we could start off where we left the last time, said Shiva, turning towards Sati. I don't think I have to be your teacher or anything like that. I just wanted to see your dance. Sati felt her strange discomfort returning once again. What was it about Shiva that made her feel that she was breaking the law when she spoke to him? She was allowed to talk to men as long as she kept a respectable distance. Why should she feel guilty? I will try my best, said Sati formally. It would be enriching to hear your views on how I can improve myself. I really do respect you for your dancing skills. Respect? Why respect? Why not love? Shiva smiled politely. He knew instinctively that saying anything at this point of time would spoil the moment. Sati took a deep breath, girded her angavastram around her waist, and committed herself to the Natraj pose. Shiva smiled as he felt Mother Earth project her Shakti, her energy into Sati. Energized by the earth she stood upon, Sati began her dance, and she had really improved. The emotions seemed to course through her. She had always been technically good, but the passion elevated her dance to the next level. Shiva felt a dreamy sense of unreality overcome him again. Sati maintained a magnetic hold over him as she moved her lithe body with the dance steps. For some moments, Shiva imagined that he was the man that Sati was longing for in her dance. When she finally came to a stop, the audience spontaneously applauded. That was the best I have ever seen you dance, said the Guruji with pride. Thank you, Guruji, said Sati as she bowed. Then she looked expectantly at Shiva. It was fantastic, exclaimed Shiva. Absolutely fabulous. Didn't I tell you that you had it in you? I thought that I didn't get it exactly right at the moment of attack, said Sati critically. You're being too hard on yourself, consoled Shiva. That was just a slight error. It happened only because you missed out on holding one angle at your elbow. That made your next move a little odd. Rising swiftly to his feet, Shiva continued, See, I will show you. He walked quietly towards Sati and touched her elbow to move it to the correct angle. Sati immediately recoiled in horror as there was a gasp from the Guruji as well as Kritika. Shiva instantly realized that something terrible had happened. I'm sorry, said Shiva, with a look of sincere regret. I was just trying to show you where your elbow should be. Sati continued to stare at Shiva, stunned into immobility. The Guruji was the first to recover his wits and realize that Shiva must undergo the purification ceremony. Go to your Pandit Shiva, tell him you need a Shuddhikaran. Go before the day is over. What? What is a Shuddhikaran? Why would I need it? Please go for a Shuddhikaran, Shiva, said Sati, as tears broke through her proud eyes. I would never be able to forgive myself if something were to happen to you. Nothing will happen to me. Look, I am really sorry if I have broken some rule by touching you. I will not do it again. Let's not make a big deal of this. It is a big deal, shouted Sati. The violence of Sati's reaction threw Shiva off balance. Why the hell is this simple thing being blown completely out of proportion? Kritika came up close to Sati while being careful not to touch her and whispered, "We should go back home, my lady." "No, no, please stay," pleaded Shiva. "I won't touch you, I promise." With a look of hopeless despair, Sati turned to leave, followed by Kritika and Guruji. At the edge of the hedge, she turned around and beseeched Shiva once again. "Please go for your Shuddhikaran before nightfall, please." At the look of uncomprehending mutiny on Shiva's face, the Guruji advised, "Listen to her, Shiva. She speaks for your own good." "What bloody nonsense!" yelled Shiva as his disturbed thoughts finally broke through his desperate effort at silent acceptance. He was lying in his bedroom at the royal guest house. He had not undergone the Shuddhikaran. He had not even bothered to find out what the ceremony was. Why would I need to be purifying for touching Sati? I want to spend all my remaining year touching her in every possible way. Am I going to keep on undergoing a Shuddhikaran every day? Ridiculous. Just then, a troubling thought entered Shiva's mind. Is it because of me? Am I not allowed to touch her because I am caste unmarked? An inferior barbarian? No, that can't be true, whispered Shiva to himself. Sati doesn't think like that. She is a good woman. But what if it's true? Maybe if she knows that I am the Neelkant.